All right, you're still watching the morning telecast of programs on Rapid TV. Channel 176 on Star Times, and of course this is Rapid TV's social, political and general interest show we call Korero. I am Nkamiang John the Beloved, also known as the Controversial, and on today's edition of the show, as I told you yesterday, we are taking a look at the power sector. I know, yes, that caught your attention, right? Yes, that is one of the most talked about subject of discussion across Nigeria today, whether the high or the low, the highs and mighties. In fact, when the new tariff regime came out, I could hear Nigerians say, the rich also cry, regardless of whether you're in band A, band B, or bands. I even hear there's a band Z. I've seen the caricature all over social media. But while Nigerians at all levels continue to deliberate on how the sector can find a lasting solution to the issue of power distribution and supply across the country, and of course the reason behind the reverse service-based tariff and its attendant issues, the question I would like to start the show with this morning is, as a Nigerian, do you know your rights as an electricity consumer? Let's start the conversation from there. Do you know your rights as an electricity consumer? I know for millions of Nigerians watching me this morning will be like, what's he talking about? What right? Ours is to consume and pay. But yes, because you are a consumer, there are certain rights, even embedded in the Constitution, that suggest how well you should enjoy electricity supply. Listen to this.
Did you know you're entitled to 1,000 naira for every day that your light is illegally disconnected? The electricity power sector reform is the law regulating electricity in Nigeria, and it provides for the basic rights of an electricity customer, as well as the laws and regulations that provide for the performance standards that a distribution company is to follow in dealing with electricity customers. Now, some of the basic rights of an electricity customer include the right to be correctly billed, the right to electricity supply, the right to transparent billing, the right to file a complaint, the right to contest any electricity bill, the right to refund when overbilled, and the right to get notice in writing before your electricity is disconnected. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission provides for the procedure that a distribution company is to follow before disconnecting a customer's light. First, the distribution company must ensure that you have been correctly billed, and then send you a bill with the payment date boldly stated in the electricity bill. Where it has been discovered that you have not been paying your electricity bill, a disconnection notice would be sent. The time frame between the payment date and the disconnection date must not be less than 3 months. After which, the distribution company may then send a notice of disconnection no later than 10 days from the date that the bill was delivered. Where a distribution company disconnects your light without following the due procedures stipulated by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, such disconnection is deemed illegal, and you as an electricity consumer can sue for damages. You are also entitled to 1,000 naira for each day that your light is illegally disconnected. I hope you've learned something today.
I do hope you have learned something today. As I like to say, I'm a student of the law, a student of life and a student of the law, and I've realized that life and law are interwoven. So you need to know your rights as an electricity consumer, and then based on those rights, we can now have objective conversations with regards to the various changes and recent developments as far as the power sector is concerned. So if you're just joining us, this is Rapid TV's social, political, and general interest show. We call it Korero, the conversation. I am Nkamiang John, the beloved, also known as the controversial. Now, the show is live and interactive on all our social media platforms. So, as always, I encourage you to follow and like Rapid TV on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and even LinkedIn. Remember, we are at Official Rapid TV. Yes, at Official Rapid TV. You can add the hashtag Korero, hashtag Band A, hashtag Band B, hashtag Band C, hashtag NEPA, as we like to call it. I grew up in that era, so till tomorrow, I still know them as NEPA. Never expect power, always. All right. Well, today on the show, as you have may have guessed, if you're just joining us, we are looking at the power sector. Now, Nigeria's House of Representatives have urged the federal government to find a lasting solution to the issues of power distribution and supply across the country through the Ministry of Power and Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. Now, the call was based on a motion of urgent public importance moved by a member of the House, Unyime Idem, PDP, Akwa Ibom, at plenary, which the lawmaker unanimously adopted and was titled Urgent Need for the House Intervention and Prevention of Total Collapse of Power Supply to the Nation. Yes. Now, in a swift reaction, the Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, has said that the federal government would sell off the electricity distribution companies, DISCOs as we know them, now under the management of banks and the asset management company ANCOM in the next 3 months to reputable technical power operators. So, I wonder, where were these reputable power operators before now, when under President Olusegun Obasanjo, the power sector was unbundled initially? Well, the minister added that the energy distribution assets are technical, and as such, they should be under the management of technical experts. I agree. Now, as it stands, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, is currently under the management of the United Bank of Africa, UBA. Okay, so bankers have now become power generators. Fidelity Bank manages Benin Electricity Distribution Company, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company, and Kano Electricity Distribution Company, while Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company is under the AMCOM management. Now, they all found themselves under the new management arrangement owing to their inability to repay their debts. Now, according to the Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, the ministry will prevail on the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC, NERC, to revoke underperforming licenses and also change the management board of DISCOs if it becomes the solution to the supply end of our power sector deliverables, as it were. Well, joining me this morning to discuss how to tackle, or how we can begin to tackle, the challenges in Nigeria's power sector is the head of operations of the Electricity Hub. She's a trained journalist and most importantly, an energy analyst. So I think I got the right person to have this conversation with this morning. I'm pretty excited because we were supposed to have this conversation yesterday, and but she couldn't make it because yesterday there was a online and I think physical dialogue on Wednesday, still on the subject of the recent developments in the power sector, the new tariff, and of course suggestions to sell the discos to more capable hands, as suggested by the Minister of Power. I'd like to welcome Omono Okonkwo. I hope I got that name correct.
Okay, Omono Okonkwo.
Omono Okonkwo. So you're welcome to Korero. Thanks for making our time to be with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
Right, so let's start with the dialogue that held on Wednesday.
Yes.
I was particularly interested, and I think issues relating to the power sector should really concern the interests of virtually every Nigerian. But first of all, how did the dialogue go, and what were the fallouts of that conversation?
Okay, so on Wednesday, April 24, we had our monthly power dialogue at the
Electricity. It's a monthly dialogue.
Yeah, it's a monthly dialogue. It's both in person and virtual. Yeah. So on that day, we discussed state electricity markets, the future of Nigeria's power sector. So we had the Honorable Commissioner for Power, Transportation and Renewable Energy, Benue State, Barrister Omale. We had a policy advisor to the Enugu State government, Louisa Chinedu Okeke, and then we had Adedotun Eyinade, he's program manager for NOMAP, which is executed by Shell. So they discussed the electricity markets, which is a fallout from the 2023 Electricity Act that was signed into law by President Tinubu last year, as you know. So the discussions were just centered on how, you know, recently the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, they handed over regulatory functions to 3 states. We have Enugu State, Ekiti State, and Ondo State. So what this means is they already have an electricity market framework in these states, yeah? So NERC has given them the power to regulate their own electricity markets. Yes. So our guests basically just looked at the possibilities of having all the 36 states having their own electricity markets and how that is supposed to look like in terms of investments, in terms of, you know, added capacity when it comes to infrastructure, which also leads to investments, because that's very important. You know, you have an electricity sector that is riddled already with a lot of debts. And that debt is, you know, I think when Nigerians look at power debts, they think only in terms of the fault of government or the fault of stakeholders. I don't think people really think about the fact that there is a lot of lack of willingness to pay electricity bills. Yeah, I don't know if you were aware. Of course, you should be aware. Some months ago, I think it was in February or March, this day, they published a list, yeah, from AEDC of people that were owing power bills.
Now,
yeah?
but if you look at that list, a larger portion of that list was made up of
MDAs. Yes, ministries, departments, and agencies.
Exactly.
Yeah. So aside from the regular Nigerian owing electricity bills, you have MDAs that are supposed to be the first to say, oh yeah, let's pay our bills. Yeah. So they were owing to the tune of billions of naira. And we had the Ministry of Power on that list. We had Aso Rock on that list. So it all goes down to this same issue of, oh, the discos not having enough money to even fund their business. So at the end of the day, you blame the discos for, oh yeah, you're not taking enough power to distribute. But if their capacity doesn't go beyond a certain level, how are they supposed to take on more power from TCN? Because it's still the same infrastructural deficit that we're talking about. So if I'm not paying my bills, if I'm bypassing my meter, even as someone who works a 9-to-5 job, for instance, and I know I get a salary at the end of the month, I decide, oh yeah, I don't need to pay for power. I have to pay my children's school fees and other things, but I don't see electricity as something I should pay for. And then MDAs are also thinking that way. And they have more bills to pay. So at the end of the day, what revenue is the disco, for instance, supposed to fall back on? And then to make sure that they have enough money to reinvest in their business, get access to infrastructure, or, you know, increase their own capacity at the end of the day.
Some will argue that this should have been part of the feasibility study done by this discourse at the initial stage to be sure that, look, if I'm investing X amount of money, I should be able to guarantee that I can recoup my investment, especially for service provided. I mean, part of the fallout of that gave birth to prepaid meters as we had them. So now what we do is pay as you consume, right? And at a point, that was liberalized. Now you can walk to almost any metering company and get your meter without it having to be just AEDC, because AEDC has, from what I understand here in Abuja, sublet to a few metering companies to be able to handle that. Now, but the question I want to ask is, with this conversation of the NERC breaking down the markets, giving states the powers to regulate their markets, does that bring us any closer to what we see in Europe, places like Germany, a place I have visited and lived, you know, done holiday? The power market in Germany is such that I could generate power, consume what I consume, and if there is excess, I can sell to the national grid. Is that where we are headed to now, to the point where Nigerians can actually begin to generate their own power, and then the excess they can sell?
Yeah, let me take you back to the 2023 Electricity Act. Was signed into law last year. You know, it gives powers to states, and those powers are also vested in people, individuals, businesses, organizations. Yes, you can generate your own power. It doesn't even have to be gas. It can be embedded generation. It can be renewables. It can be any kind of renewables, solar, hydro, mini hydro projects, any kind of source that you can get your hands on. Yes, you can generate, and you can even sell the excess, right? But you also, where you are, the state has to have an operational market framework. So if there is no operational market framework, then it's really difficult. Like you already know, we have states that are active in this thing, like Enugu State, Ekiti State, Ondo, Lagos, and other states are upcoming. Yeah, they're moving forward into the state's electricity market thing. So at the end of the day, the onus is on the people to be aware that, yes, the Electricity Act has already given states the power to do these things. And then they hold their governments accountable and say, okay, yes, we already know that this thing is possible. What are you doing about it to make sure that we are closer today than we were yesterday? So that's just the point. Right? So we have states like Enugu State that is at the forefront of this thing. They already have their regulatory commission, I think, and other states, they're following closely behind. They're ready to do this thing. So it all depends on the states. The governor, the commissioners, and everyone else, they need to be able to sit down and say, okay, this is how we're going to make sure that our framework is built. And this is how we're going to sustain it. And how do we sustain it? We make sure that investors, both local and foreign, they are aware that when they bring in their money is safe, first of all. There is no, I mean, investors are not charity organizations, right? So when they know that their money, if they bring in their money, it's going to be safe and secure, and they're able to make returns, of course they will come.
There is no argument that Nigeria has the markets, whether at the macro or micro level, as far as the energy sector is concerned. But my worry, and I think this is the worry for most Nigerians, just as we saw new reverse tariffs come up, what are stakeholders also looking at putting in place systems, price control frameworks that ensures that customers are not overbilled? I give you an example. In this facility, just yesterday night, one of my colleagues, or two of my colleagues, the head of admin and the secretary to our board, she was stunned. The secretary to the board was stunned when the guy who's in charge of monitoring our power and told her that our power units had reduced And she was like, wait, you guys just recharged barely 2-3 days ago. How is it that in just 2 to 3 days, so much has been consumed? And I was quick to respond. I said, look, in Nigeria, 1 gig is not 1 gig. So, I mean, when the new tariff came up, we had people on the various bands who had bought power units. And it was all over social media. I remember, I think my accommodation is on band B. And we bought, and we got about 100 and something units from the amount we paid for. Somebody bought much higher and got lesser units, and there was a whole lot of argument. So the question is, how does the eventual electricity consumer, how is he or she safeguarded from indiscriminate, because now that the states are regulating, what that suggests is that investors will come, invest their money, improve on the infrastructure, power infrastructure framework within those states,
yes,
or even the regions, and naturally for any businessman want to make profit, they expect return on investment. So in the end, how do these states ensure that within their market framework that the consumer is protected, and there are price control measures to ensure that there is no indiscriminate increase of tariffs like we've seen in recent times?
Good. So one word, regulation. Another word, competition. You know, what the Electricity Act does is to give an opportunity to several kinds of investors. So you have, on one hand, investors that will come and say, okay, we want to provide power to this commercial cluster, or we want to provide power to this residential estate. And then at the end of the day, when they start providing that power regulated by that state, the state is aware, okay, this is how much you're charging per kilowatts. Maybe in January 2025, this is how much you're charging. By February 2025, if that tariff goes beyond that particular figure that it was in January, they will review, right? And if they see that the market conditions give reasons why that tariff should increase by February 2025, then it's justified, right? For instance, you have Forex, right? And then you have production costs. If they review that and it's justified, they can now tell the people in that cluster and say, okay, this is the reason why. This is why the Electricity Act is so beautiful. You know, when it comes to the national grid, we are so many under all these discos. Right?
Yes.
It's really hard for, most times the discos, they try, they give out statements, maybe, oh, there is a planned outage in this particular area or cluster. But then if you have states giving electricity to these little clusters around the states, it's easier to manage information. It's easier to pass information and say, okay, you should expect a rise, maybe a 2% rise in your tariff from this month before that time comes. So people prepare. And if they are not able to, they can say, oh yeah, you should downgrade me to this level because I can't afford this. So it's easier to manage, right? But if they review and they see, oh yeah, you're increasing your tariff per kilowatt for March 2025 as opposed to February 2025, it's not justified because the forex then is the forex rate then is the same forex rate now, and the market conditions are saying the same thing that they were saying. Maybe the inflation rate even went down. So why are you increasing your tariff? And then they give people this information and people say, oh well, there is somebody else doing the same thing and their tariffs are lower. So competition and regulation, that's the solution.
1 month ago,
yeah,
the forex, the tango between the naira and the dollar, almost every Nigerian was ready to jackpot. But today, the naira seems to have, you know, is almost rubbing shoulders with the dollar. But the tariff.
Yeah, I know.
The last time we ever experienced a situation where government came out to say, they were bringing down the tariff. I think it happened twice in a succession of about 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And I remember we had that was under the Buhari administration where we witnessed that. And I think that's the first time in the history of our nation. But now the Naira is stabilizing against the dollar. But yet the tariff, we are still doing band A, band B, and band C.
I have a response for you. Now, yes, the Naira is rubbing a little bit, rubbing shoulders with the dollar. But what is the inflation rate right now? Isn't it more than it was last month? Isn't it more than it was 2 months ago? But
the inflation rate has always been relatively pegged on the performance of the Naira against the dollar.
Yes, so that's why I mentioned the inflation rate, because it's surprising even to me. I'm not an economist, right? But at the end of the day, you would expect that as the Naira is, as you said, rubbing shoulders with the dollar, everything else should naturally fall.
Exactly.
But you're buying food in your house every day. The prices, are they falling? Nothing is falling. In fact, everything is increasing.
True.
Yeah, transportation fares for people who that do not drive is increasing every day, even as of this morning. You know, so everything is increasing. Why not tariffs? Because everything still boils down to tariffs. People who produce power, they're spending money, right? And even if you say the forex rate is, so to speak, not what it was 2 months ago or last month, is relatively better. But everything else, commodity prices, food prices, everything else is on the high side.
Shouldn't power be the one that should be virtually the cheapest thing that Nigerians, because virtually every other thing, whether at the macro or microeconomic level, is dependent on power. So shouldn't power naturally be the cheapest service that the average Nigerian should be able to afford?
Well, it should be if our infrastructural, or if our infrastructure, our power infrastructure was at 100%. But you know it's not. We still lack a lot of these things. And since 2024 started, we've had high levels of vandalism.
True.
Since January, from January till date, even as recent as last week, I think we had an incident at the Jos Gombe transmission line. So it's all these things still contribute to why we need to keep increasing these tariffs, so they can have money to replace this infrastructure.
Now, beyond replacing this infrastructure, what about the subject of securing this infrastructure?
Exactly.
I have been part of conversations where the argument has been that we should begin to deploy technology. Some people have, some experts have suggested drones, as in the case in China, where they have drones and robots actually maintaining and monitoring transmission lines, because just like Nigeria, China has a lot of undeveloped terrain, and to be able to still get power to the hinterlands of China, it has deployed technology to be able to make that happen. Why can't we borrow from approaches like that?
Yeah, we can, but at the end of the day, it's funding. We simply do not have the money for all those. Because, like I said at the beginning, we lack a proper channel of making sure that what is being pushed out is completely being paid for. Even as it is, even before the tariffs were increased, what we push out in terms of power is not completely paid for. We have the issue of electricity subsidies. We have the issue of debts, people refusing to pay their debts. People, even organizations, they bypass. They have meters, they bypass these meters. We have people that are on estimated billing, yes. We've had cases of overbilling by discos for estimated billing users, right? And then we also have people who bypass their meters. We also have people who are comfortable staying years and years and years, even as MDAs, and they don't pay power bills. So where are we go? How are we going to buy these robots? How are we going to buy these drones? How are we going to buy the SCADA system that is needed in the for Transmission Company of Nigeria, or upgrade the SCADA that they have? It doesn't make any sense. We can't just say, oh yeah, let's model after China, if we do not have the funds. And if some Nigerians believe, oh yeah, I can say, yes, I want power, but I'm not ready to pay for the power, and yeah, you can't do anything about it. We legit have some discos that are afraid to go to some places to ask, oh, you guys are owing, please pay your bills. They are scared because they will attack them. There is this documentary, the Electricity Hub next year is collaborating with Griot Studios. Griot Studios, they published, or they produced a documentary. It's called Up-NEPA, your favorite phrase. It's called Up-NEPA. It's premiering next month. And they looked at a range of issues, from the history of Nigeria's power sector down to the Electricity Act. So you have from 1920 under NESCO, where we had that thing in Plateau State, and then you have...
Still, surprisingly, I hear they're still operating.
Oh, yeah, they are actually. And then they look at a wide range of issues from that time till now. And one of the issues is even these disco workers, when they go to some certain areas to disconnect people for not paying their bills, they attack them. You would see someone, a disco worker is up on the ladder trying to, you know, disconnect people, and they just come push the ladder and the person falls. That's a human being. Yeah, they're afraid to go to some areas to say, oh, and that is the right thing to do, but some Nigerians just don't believe that. And then they expect an El Dorado. How do you bring that El Dorado to them if they're not willing to do what they need to do? So it's not just about government. I know, yeah, the government is still in charge of transmission, right? And there's a lot wrong in the transmission.
In transmission,
yeah,
true,
yeah,
true.
There's a lot that needs to be done there, right? But at the end of the day, you still have a lot that is wrong with the consumer. The consumers, some consumers are not willing to pay their bills. Some consumers believe that electricity is a human right, like they don't need to pay for it.
But there are countries where electricity is free.
Oh yeah, they've reached that level. We haven't. We just don't have the infrastructure. Like I just mentioned, there's a lot wrong in transmission, right? We have these transmission lines and they're being vandalized. Now, I would like to point out that regular Nigerians allegedly cannot just go and vandalize a transmission line.
Exactly.
Some people are afraid to even touch the fuse in their houses. So you think, and then you ask yourself, who are the people vandalizing these lines, and what is their end game? Right? But that's a problem in itself. And then you have the Presidential Power Initiative initiated by former President Buhari. It's still not being actualized. This is 2024. That project was supposed to start in 2018 or 2017. We had a lot of delays because, first of all, there was COVID-19, and then there were some issues with payments and financing and all that. But still, I know the Ministry of Power, Minister for Power has said that, yes, the project is still being worked on, but we haven't gotten to that level yet. And it's more about the transmission. Yeah,
but
transmission infrastructure, distribution infrastructure in Nigeria, dilapidated, weak.
On this subject of infrastructure and funding, over the years, there have been support funding from World Bank, African Development Bank. Yeah. So where's the money going? If DISCOs, TCN cannot access the funds they require to be able to put in place the kind of infrastructure that's required for them to deliver quality service to Nigerians?
Yes, I would say for TCN, yes, they've had some funding. And yes, they're executing projects too. In fact, every day they would show you evidence that, oh, this transmission line was just placed in this particular location or this region. Yeah, so they're doing all these things. They're actually doing that, right? But is it enough? Nigeria is a large country. True. And there are still millions, almost 100 million people in this same country that still lack access to electricity. There are some areas that still lack distribution and transmission infrastructure. So yes, the money is being used, But at the end of the day, if on the other hand, other infrastructure or other transmission lines are being vandalized and others are also getting more weak, more old, there is still a lot more funding that needs to come in.
Okay, I know you're very busy this period, and I did promise I wasn't going to keep you for too long. But in wrapping up this conversation, what should be the take-home for the average Nigerian electricity consumer? The
take-home should be, please, endeavor to pay your bills. And like the lady said, know your rights. If you feel you're being overcharged, take your complaints directly to your disco. If they do not answer you, go to NERC. If NERC does nothing about it, go to FCCPC. And now that we have concentration on states, right, state governments need to ensure that within that state, investors, local and foreign, understand that, okay, this is what you are doing, and this is how they can tap into it. You need to be transparent with what you are doing, because cutting this thing down into states is that if we can make it work, it will make power more accessible. That's the truth, because then you have it in smaller clusters. You can be able to control it better. You can be able to relate with people better. You can be able to pass information better, because I think one of the problems of the power sector is mostly lack of information. Aside from the infrastructure thing and governance, is also information, lack of information. If people do not know, for instance, a lot of people still are not aware that the State Electricity Act, or rather the Electricity Act of 2023, has actually given them the power to generate and transmit electricity, maybe as a business or an organization. They don't know about that. So if people know that they should hold their state governor and his deputy accountable and say, yeah, when are you giving us this market framework? They will work faster. They will implement faster. They will bring in technical experts faster. They will be able to do, because you cannot grow the economy of a state without electricity. True. Electricity is the base of every kind of economic growth you can think about. It's for health. I mean, if you have healthcare centers, how are you going to power them? You have, like Benue said, like I mentioned, food basket of the nation. How are they going to process whatever it is that they are planting and harvesting? True. So they need power. So if you want your state to grow, you will implement this market framework faster, what the Act has given you. You ride on that and you make things happen for your people. So if the people are not aware of that, then it's a loss to them. So I think they should be aware of that. And that's what we try to do at the Electricity Hub. We try to create that awareness for people through this power dialogue. We do it monthly. In fact, next month, we're going to talk about tariffs and metering, because that's very important. So look out for that, because we're going to discuss that. We're going to bring in high-level discussants, panelists. They will, put this thing out once and for all, tell people exactly what to expect, what they need to do, and what the government and states, what they should be doing as well.
All right. At this point, I would like to solicit that Rapid TV would be very much interested in next month's dialogue platform. Oh, you're welcome. And most importantly, we would also like to air that documentary Up-NEPA.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, we would love to. Anything to sensitize, educate, mobilize Nigerians as we started the show, for them to know their rights and know what to expect in terms of quality of service. Yes. Well, to wrap up this conversation, the show is not over just yet. I will leave you with the Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, as he shed some light on the latest moves of government to find lasting solutions to the issues of power distribution and supply across the country. And of course, special thanks to my guest, the head of operations at the Electricity Hub, trained journalist, I like to emphasize that, and most importantly, energy analyst. She did an awesome job. I mean, she schooled me today. Omono Okonkwo, thank you so much for being part of today's conversation.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I leave you in the hands of Minister of Power. I am Nkamiang John, the beloved, also known as the controversial. Till Monday, have a wonderful weekend.
workshop is vital as it will address the critical power challenges facing our beloved nation as we transition towards a multi-tier electricity market. Our gathering today underscores the significance of power in driving economic prosperity, sustainable development, and global competitiveness. You are always aware that the Nigerian electricity industry over the decades, having been facing numerous challenges that have hindered its ability to provide reliable and adequate power supply to the country's population. We believe that no other sector can actually operate optimally without a stable, functional, and reliable power sector. We just continue to scratch the surface. And we all understand our mandate from the Ministry of Power, which has to do with medium-term to long-term sustainability of this sector to expedite national development through formulation of appropriate policies, establishment of the right structures, systems, and institutions that will guarantee the long-term sustainability of the power sector to ensure that it is able to supply reliable, functional, cost-effective electricity to households, to businesses, and to industries. To this end, the power sector is a multi-layer sector. The Federal Ministry provides general oversight of the sector, while we have the regulator that does day-to-day regulation and monitoring and management of the power sector operators. Then we have the operators themselves that cut across all the three segments in the power sector value chain, from generation to transmission and to distribution. So the short-term issues that we have in the power sector is actually the direct responsibility of the operators, while the regulators and the ministry are supposed to compel them to optimal performance. Some of the major challenges that we have in the sector include inadequate power generation capacity, gas supply constraints, inadequate transmission and distribution infrastructure, the aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses, regulatory and policy challenges, and inadequate financing of power sector new investments due to lack of liquidity. This has resulted in an energy deficit that has stifled economic growth, it has hindered industrialization, and diminished the quality of life of millions of our citizens compared to their counterparts in the Western world. In order to tackle some of these challenges, which aim to improve electricity access and meet ambitious targets for the country's energy demand, the present administration of His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in his renewed hope agenda, is determined and committed to address issues in the power sector and enhance the quality of life for all Nigerians. In his wisdom, he assented to the Electricity Act of 2023, which has liberalized Nigeria's electricity generation, transmission, and distribution at the national level, empowering states, companies, and individuals to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. The Electricity Act of 2023 has been a significant legal milestone, allowing states to establish their own electricity markets and aiming to propel the Nigeria electricity supply industry NESI into the post-privatization phase. The collaboration between the federal government and states is crucial for a smooth transition to a decentralized electricity market. My esteemed members of the House of Assembly, the path ahead will not be without challenges. We all know that there will not be any gain without temporary pain. Vested interests and entrenched practices may resist change, but we must remain steadfast and resolute in our commitment to reform and transform the sector. We owe it to our citizens, to our industries, and to the future prosperity of our nation. It is my earnest plea to this august gathering to support the necessary policy and regulatory reforms that will propel our nation towards a more efficient sustainable and equitable energy future. As we migrate, we must confront with the challenges of infrastructure deficits, the issue of regulatory oversight and coordination, the challenge of technical expertise and human capacity development. Also, we cannot overlook the financial implications of this transition with the relevant market design and regulations required and consumer education and awareness. Significant regulation, expertise, and investment will be required to meet up with these envisaged challenges and modernize the power sector, ensuring they can accommodate the increased capacity and complexity brought about by the Act. Finally, while the Electricity Act of 2023 presents immense opportunities for transforming Nigeria's electricity landscape, its successful implementation will hinge on our ability to overcome these formidable challenges. It will require unwavering commitment, strategic planning, and collaborative efforts from all stakeholders, from the federal to the state government to the local government, private sector operators, the civil society, foreign investors, and the Nigerian people themselves. Before I conclude, I would like to use this opportunity to mention a few things that we have been working on in the Power Ministry and our agencies to ensure that we achieve the transformation of this sector within the shortest possible time. And as members of the House of Representatives of the Federal Government of Nigeria, I believe that by virtue of your responsibility as the elected representative of the people, you are the closest to the people. I know you are faced with a lot of questions, a lot of complaints from your various constituencies on what we are going to do to reform or transform this power sector. So it will be appropriate for us to carry you along and to intimate you with some of the efforts that we are making at the ministry and our agencies, because we have passed the era of lamentations. We have passed the era of diagnosis. We have passed the era of finding solutions. We know the solutions. We are now at the era of execution and faithful implementation of our workable and practical solutions. So without taking too much of your time, I believe we are discussing power sector. When we are talking about power sector, I believe our ministry is in focus, and we must use every opportunity to carry you along on some of the steps that we have taken without wasting your time today. What we have done recently have actually provoked national discourse about the state of the power sector and things that we need to do. It has encouraged national consciousness and national awareness that everybody, every household, every business, and every institution, be it health or educational institutions, and every real industry, they are now aware of what we are doing in the industry and the steps that we need to take to achieve the desired transformation. What we did is a bold step and a courageous step to attack the root cause of the problems in the sector, unlike what we have experienced in the past, where we have always been attacking the symptoms and day-to-day operational issues in the sector. What we have touched is to touch on the critical issues that some of the past administrations have shied away from addressing. It's not a popularity game. It's a transformation challenge, and we must stand up to it. Irrespective of the negative fallouts, name-calling, abuses, we must be steadfast. We must be focused and not drop the ball to ensure we get to the El Dorado. The liquidity issues and historical debt in the sector is a major, major problem. As a commercial entity, if I'm not paid for my past services, do you expect me to continue to supply? This is not possible. It is against the force of nature. Every business must follow the natural commercial flow of production, of transportation, of delivery, and of receiving payment, and of settling all the operators in the sector. If this does not exist, the life of that sector will be cut short, and in no time it will be fully grounded. So the liquidity is very key, and the payment of outstanding debt to the generating companies, to the gas supply companies, is very key for them to be able to support us as a sector to ramp up outputs And we are talking about infrastructural deficit across all segments of the power sector. They call it 3 segments. I call it 5 because it starts from gas supply. Because preponderance of our power output is from gas-fired plants, about 75%. What 25% comes from the hydroelectric power plant. So gas segment is very key in terms of the quality of gas, in terms of the quantity of gas, in terms of the pipeline and the gas operators. We have a lot of infrastructure deficit in there. It affects the pressure that gets to the power plants, no boosters, no compressors, all this, and even the pipelines are being vandalized. These are things that we must focus on. Now to the generating sector. A lot of the turbines are down because there is no money to service them. The gas supply is inadequate. How would they produce to what we expect them to produce? So now to talk about the transmission sector. We have witnessed incessant collapse of the transmission. It's nothing but lack of adequate infrastructure, dilapidated infrastructure, old and archaic infrastructure that have been installed 50, 60 years ago, in the days, since the days of the ECN, which is the Electricity Company of Nigeria, the days of NEPA to PHCN, before the unbundling of the sector. I once said that on my visit to some of these substations, I noticed the transformer installed in the 60s, carrying the logo of ECN over 50 years ago. How will that support the transmission sector? We lack the adequate technology, we don't have SCADA, and there's also no backup or failover grid if anything happens to our national grid. These are the shortfalls in the transmission that we must fight. Then the big elephant, the distribution companies. We've seen the privatization. It wasn't bad because it had laudable objectives, but the execution of this privatization was actually fraught with a lot of inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. This has led to lots of structural issues, which we are also battling with. Then the customers themselves. The meter gap is over 8 million. There is power theft. There is vandalization. So all these 5 segments are what we are working on. And we believe that the new tariff regime, which is a hybrid of the subsidized regime and the cost-reflective regime. I don't even call it cost-reflective. It is called service-reflective regime. Because if you cannot supply power to a minimum number of hours, you cannot charge it. And we will not allow consumers to be cheated. It's only on those feeders and on those consumers that you can guarantee minimum of 20 hours that you have the right legally to charge this new tariff. This is an incentive to the discos for them to invest more in all those other bands and migrate them in no time to the service-reflective tariff band. Then we're talking about structural and institutional issues inherited from the implementation of the privatization process. A lot of the investors in discos, like I mentioned yesterday, they didn't have the financial strength to come into this sector. They didn't have the technical expertise to come into this sector. And a lot of them thought power sector is a short-term sector where they can realize both their capital and interest. But no, it's a long-term investment that you cannot really get your investment back in 2, 3, 4 years, or not to talk of the profits. A lot of them did not come in with their private equity. They borrowed monies from banks, and they were under the pressure to pay back some of these loans, which is why we have seen a number of the discos taken over by banks and by AMCONs. And we are seeing that within a very short time, all these discos must go back to conventional power operators to ensure we have a smooth operation of the discos. So this new tariff will address issues of liquidity, issues of investment and infrastructure deficit, as well as stimulation of demand and ramping up of generation output, focusing on all forms of sources. The thermal plant with stable and quality gas supplies, large and small hydroelectric power plants, for example, the Shungeru that we just opened, Kashibila, and the 26 small hydropower plants across the country. And we're also focusing on renewable energy sources, covering solar in the northeast, northwest, and north central, and some part of the southwest, covering wind energy in the coastal cities of Lagos State, Ogun State, Ondo State, Edo, Delta, Rivers, Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, and Cross River states. And lastly, we have investment proposals for establishment of 3 gigawatts, which is 3,000 megawatts of solar energy source across the 25 states in the north and the southwest. This is novel, and we believe it will go a long way to solve our power problems. And we're also encouraging state governments to invest in embedded distributed power generation within their states. We have seen the case of Abia State, and a lot of other states are following suit. Just yesterday, NEC actually granted Enugu and the Ekiti State the right to regulate electricity within their state. If we have one more other state, we have to wait a bit. Let's use these 3 states as pilots, as proof of concept to see how it will operate smoothly, because there will definitely be overlaps. There will be conflict. And let us learn from these 3 states before we can deploy to other states of the Federation. Then we have seen a sectional migration and transition of all electricity consumers, not only to cost-reflective tariff, but a service-reflective tariff. On the overall, sectoral sustainability is assured with desired impact on productivity in other sectors. This presupposes that a carrot and stick framework where discourse will now be strictly monitored, regulated, and whipped into performance, whether they like it or not. In fact, there will be need to franchise some underserved and unserved communities in discourse territories, while the discourse are ring-fenced along state lines. We are also looking at the rural electrification and Nigeria's energy transition plan, introduction of renewable energy service companies, just like the discourse. We are looking at licensing some rescos that will be in charge of microgrids and mini-grids in our rural communities. Today, we have close to 300 mini-grids spread across the Federation rural communities. How are they managed? They are managed by small companies that we cannot guarantee their sustainability. But this must be in the hands of medium and big companies with good capital base that can actually manage not less than minimum 25 to 50 megawatts of micro and the mini grids. So, for me to round up, and we're going to do this alongside with the State Board of Rural Electrification. We also talk about the Siemens project and the TCN uncompleted project to fix transmission and distribution infrastructures. We have over 100 uncompleted transmission company projects since 2001. A lot of them are 90%, 80% completion stages. But we need funds to ensure that we complete this project before we even move on to new ones. And unfortunately, for power projects, you cannot energize unless they are 100% completed. We are looking at acquisition of SCADA, which is the supervisory, SCADA, which is the automated frequency management and supervisory control and data acquisition. The supergrid project, we are working on it, and we are trying to acquire spinning reserves that will eliminate incessant grid collapse. Funding of the spinning reserve will be across the industry sector operators. Then we have a presidential metering initiative to clear existing metering deficits and possibly an eventual liberalization of the metering acquisition and installation process with NEMSA, that's the Nigerian Electricity Management Service Agency, the meter manufacturers, and the DISCOs. We are rolling out the revised, resilient, and workable sectoral policies consistent with our climate-friendly power operation. And we are also aware of all the negative fallbacks of radical transformation and reform of this historically notorious and reform-resistant power sector. We know it comes with abuses, like I said earlier, name-calling, call for resignation from some quarters. For the informed and the professionals in the industry, they understand what we are doing, and they know that it's a journey, and we'll get to the El Dorado. But we have saboteurs, we have enemies of progress, we have cartels, and we have those that prefer to perpetuate these entrenched regressive practices in the sector for their own personal and selfish gains. They go as far as vandalizing power assets across the country to frustrate our efforts. Their criticisms and negative actions, we accept it as sacrifices for holding public office and for getting involved in radical transformation. We have all read history of great leaders across the world, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in China, in India. Good leaders will take people to where they want to be, but great leaders must take people to where they ought to be, whether they like it or not. And at the end of the day, history and posterity will smile at such leaders. To conclude, this serves as nothing but inspiration for us to be more focused on our reforms. At the end of the day, with visible positive changes across the sector, they will finally sing our praises and posterity will eventually smile at us. So in conclusion, let me reiterate the commitment of the Ministry of Power to lead charge in confronting Nigeria's power challenge. We stand ready to collaborate with our legislative partners, state regulatory bodies, and industry stakeholders to put in place the right policy and regulatory framework necessary for the implementation of the Electricity Act of 2023, and believe that together we can unleash the full potential of Nigeria's power sector and propel our nation to a brighter, more prosperous, and more productive future.